me shout out to my cohort in the 6th row, Heather, Jessica, Tina, Ray, Tanaz, and Christina. Okay, before I say anything else, let me thank a few people. First, my mom and dad, particularly my dad for the inspiration, because he got his medical degree in a completely foreign language. I'd also like to thank my masters, both of Tai Chi and my art Kuk Soo Kwan that I teach. Among the faculty, I'd like to thank Dr. Wu, Dean Emeritus, and founder of our program for his support. I'd like to thank Big Tina-san for the idea to come here at all, and for getting me here on time the times I was on time. I'd like to thank Dr. Mir. Early on in my career at SCUHS, I had an encounter with her that set me on the road to being a valedictorian. I probably wouldn't have bothered with all the meticulousness otherwise. And I'd finally like to thank Dr. Farrell, because it seemed to me that she alone among the faculty taught this art of Oriental medicine from the understanding that it is the depths of our humanity that affect our well-being and not just our anatomy. A lot of emphasis has been placed on the gold standard of what it means for a form of medicine to be evidence-based, and endorsing that and trumpeting it loudly is something our profession has done when it suited us, and I think to great effect. If all we have to do is don a white lab coat and parrot a catchphrase to be accepted by insurance companies and the public, then sign me up. That's how we got our foot in the door, and bully for us for doing that. But saying that and actually believing it are entirely different things. And now that we'll soon be on our own, I think we should remember what we actually are. For all the legitimacy that being evidence-based lends, Oriental medicine, in its core essence, is nonetheless not and cannot be. Nor should it try to be, because other systems of medicine already fulfill that niche, and our medicine has its own special role to fulfill. A role that is one of the very reasons I feel it has grown so much. Remember a certain technique called whipping the dragon's tail, which we learned about 3rd term or so? It's a treatment for frozen shoulder that involves a subcutaneous insertion of a needle at LI14. The needle must be turned 9 times. Not 8, not 10, but exactly 9. Professor San Huang had laser eyes during the exam for that technique while we turned it, counting to make sure that we had 9 and exactly 9. It was 40% of the grade how many times you turn that needle. Seems to me there's an awful lot of numerology in this evidence-based medicine of ours. It's the same when it comes to moxibustion. It's said that it's the heat that heals, but if that were true, we'd just be using hot water bottles. No, it has to be the heat from the smoke of that particular burning herb, mugwort. Burning styrofoam, burning cigarettes, not the same thing, not going to cut it. And yet I would test it when we would put that little cone of mugwort on top of that disc of aconite and wave it over the patients. And I would put my hand underneath that aconite and there was no heat coming from there. So the efficacy of that technique seemed to be neither about the heat nor the contact, but about the ritual burning of the herb in the space with the patient. Of course, we don't tell the public that any more than we tell them that we gave them cockroach shells and squirrel poop as medicine. When anthropologists are classifying cultures whose healing modalities involve numerology, sacred herbs, and cosmological correspondences for the forces of nature that are arranged in pentagrams, they have a word for those practices. Now, don't misunderstand me. Sure, we've dabbled in a little sorcery coming up through the ranks, but I'm not disparaging these practices in the least. After 3 to 5 years, I think we can all attest that they work. Nor am I suggesting that we should try to root out these practices in an attempt to salvage what is scientific from the dross of this ancient tradition. There's already a movement that does that. It's called dry needling. I also don't believe that we should apologize for the content and the nature of these practices, which, for all their curiosity, are drawn from the ancient Chinese classics. Our dusty and dog-eared cam textbooks do happen to apologize quite frequently for the system of the ancient sages, But you must remember that they were writing this book with the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads, thanking their lucky stars that Mao allowed them to write the book at all. Science is undeniable. It is exact and it is reliable, and it excels at one thing, which is uncovering and defining expressible truth. But science is not the only way of apprehending knowledge, and not all truth is expressible. What's more, when we say that the only things that are true are those things which can be measured and observed, we lose something important, a part of our world and a part of ourselves. We know the fruits of science: cures for ancient diseases, wonders of communication, travel, and industry. But these have been traded for an overpopulation, environmental destruction, and a soulless, formulaic, and mechanical perspective on the very experience of life itself. In my first term, a professor shared his theory that chi was nothing more than the water passages in the body. And later, I read one recent graduate's internet essay that theorized that chi was nothing more than the ancients' attempt to explain the phenomenon of oxygen. Some rationalized the existence of our system of diagnosis through colors and elements by writing it off as a form of mnemonic shorthand that easily classifies the various symptoms that manifest because of biochemical causes, but ultimately has no reality of its own. As you go forward in this profession, there's no need to grapple with trying to reconcile the facts that we know about science, all the intricate physiological and chemical processes of the body, with our highly abstract system of elements and qualities and times and chi levels. One corresponds with the reality of matter, and the other with the reality of ideas. But both exist in juxtaposition with one another. Chi exists in the world of ideas, along with things like beauty and music. And just as these have a reality that is not quite fully captured by the physics of pitch modulation and the variable frequency of sound and light, so does biochemistry not quite capture the vital experience of being alive. One might even say that the world of ideas is more real than the physical world, as the Greek philosopher Plato did, because all physical things begin as ideas. Is the intuitive world of ideas true, or is the measurable world of science true? Is Chuang-Tzu dreaming he's a butterfly, or is the butterfly dreaming he's Chuang-Tzu? Rather than seeking to redefine Oriental medicine in acceptable modern terms, we should embrace the culture and history of what this art is, because it holds something that we as a society need, something that is missing. Let me share with you something written by Joseph Campbell in 1949. The invention of the power-driven machine and the development of the scientific method of research have so transformed human life that the long-inherited, timeless universe of symbols has collapsed. In the fateful, epoch-announcing words of Nietzsche's Zarathustra, "Dead are all the gods." It is the wonder story of mankind's coming to maturity. The spell of the past, the bondage of tradition, was shattered with sure and mighty strokes. The dream web of myth fell away, and modern man emerged from ancient ignorance. It is not that there is no hiding place for the gods from the searching telescope and microscope. There is no such society anymore as the gods once supported. The problem of mankind today, therefore, is exactly the opposite to that of men in the past. The lines of communication between the conscious and unconscious zones of the human psyche have all been cut, and we have been split in two. The hero deed to be wrought today is not what it was in the century of Galileo, where then there was darkness, now there is light, but also where light was, now there is darkness. The modern hero deed must be that of questing to bring to light again the lost Atlantis of the coordinated soul. The call to be a healer is an ancient one, and noble enough. But I think that more than that, in becoming acupuncturists, we were answering a call even more specific to our time. The call to reintroduce the way of living that restores balance. It is now more than ever that the world needs that Taoist wisdom. Nothing in excess, all things in moderation, was one of the things written on the wall at the Temple of Delphi in ancient Greece. Yet so much in our modern world is about diametric opposition. We rally to classify ourselves and choose an extreme with which to identify: intellectual versus emotional, cold reason versus blind faith, staunch conservative versus bleeding heart liberal, science versus superstition, us versus them. But I tell you, it is wrong to divide the world into sheep and goats. Yin and yang interact with each other, support each other, transform into each other. This is wholly different from the idea of good and evil, because in that dichotomy, one is always trying to favor one and eradicate the other. If we divide the world this way, we will always be looking for the things to bear the image of that shadow: other groups, other races, the other gender, even the unacceptable parts of ourselves. Oriental medicine is not simply magic. It's not Benny Hinn faith healing. It's not Reiki. Nor is it a mere demonstration of the vaunted placebo effect, because there's a rationale behind it, albeit a metaphysical one, and statistically it's better than placebo anyway. True to its Taoist roots, what Oriental medicine is about is balance. Its magical parts are counterpoised with its technical and observational parts. It pays attention to the practical and physical as much as to the emotional and the abstract. In Chinese medicines, the opposites do not oppose each other but support each other. It's the concrete and substantial surroundings